Let's talk about the title of this video. It's alarming, I know. Seniors, stop your morning coffee. It's silently inflating your prostate. You've probably seen headlines like this. Or maybe your doctor even gave you a pamphlet that said in no uncertain terms to avoid caffeine. It's the kind of advice that can make your heart sink, especially if that first cup of rich, hot coffee is one of the genuine pleasures of your morning, a ritual you look forward to every single day. But then you go online and you see something completely different. You see a headline from a major university talking about how coffee might actually prevent cancer. And suddenly, you're stuck. You're caught in a frustrating whirlwind of confusion. One source tells you coffee is your enemy. Another says it's your friend. Who are you supposed to believe? It can make you feel powerless, like you have to choose between enjoying your life and protecting your health. If any of that sounds familiar, I want you to take a deep breath. You are in the right place. The goal of this video is not to scare you or to give you a rigid list of rules. The goal is to give you the full, unvarnished story, because the truth about coffee and your prostate is much more complex and, frankly, much more interesting than a simple yes or no. We are going to dismantle the myths, look at what the real science says, from places like Harvard and the Mayo Clinic, and by the end of our time together, you won't feel confused or powerless. You will feel knowledgeable, and most importantly, you will feel empowered to make the right decision for your own body and your own life. We're going to talk about why your doctor's advice to quit might be spot on for your immediate comfort, and at the same time, why researchers are so excited about coffee's potential for long-term health. It sounds like a contradiction, but I promise it will all make sense. And a quick but impudent reminder, I am not a doctor, and this video is not a substitute for professional medical advice. I am a researcher and a scriptwriter, dedicated to digging through the studies, the data, and the expert opinions to bring you clear, actionable health information. The goal here is to help you have a more informed conversation with your own healthcare provider. Your health is a team effort, and you are the most valuable player on that team. So to truly understand the coffee-prostate debate, we have to start with the single most important concept that gets lost in all the noise. And that is the fact that when we say prostate problems, we are often talking about two completely different conditions that get tangled together. We're talking about the two prostates, the BPH prostate and the cancer prostate. Getting this difference straight is the foundation for everything else we're going to discuss. First, let's talk about the one that millions of men over 50, 60, and 70 are intimately familiar with: benign prostatic hyperplasia, or BPH. The word benign is key here. It means not cancerous. BPH is simply an enlarged prostate. Think of your prostate gland as a small donut that sits right at the base of your bladder, and the urethra, the tube that carries urine out of your body, passes right through the hole of that donut. As men age, for reasons related to hormonal changes, that donut can start to grow larger. It begins to swell, and as it swells, it squeezes the urethra running through its center. Imagine a perfectly good garden hose. Now, imagine someone is slowly but surely stepping down on it. The water can still get through, but the flow is weaker. It might start and stop, and the pressure builds up behind the spot where it's being squeezed. That is exactly what happens with BPH. The bladder, which is trying to push urine through that squeezed tube, has to work much harder. It gets irritable. It gets tired. This is what causes all those classic frustrating symptoms: a weak stream, difficulty starting to urinate, the feeling that you haven't fully emptied your bladder, and the most disruptive of all, frequent and urgent trips to the bathroom, especially at night. I know men who plan their entire day around the location of the nearest restroom. That's the reality of BPH. It's a quality of life issue, a mechanical problem. It's the garden hose being squeezed. Now let's talk about the other condition, prostate cancer. This is entirely different. Prostate cancer isn't about the gland simply getting bigger and squeezing the urethra. It's about the abnormal, malignant growth of cells within the prostate tissue itself. According to the American Cancer Society, it's one of the most common cancers in men, but it's crucial to understand that having BPH does not mean you're going to get prostate cancer. They are separate issues. You can have BPH without cancer. You can have cancer without significant BPH symptoms. Or you can have both at the same time. They are two different tenants living in the same building. So why is this distinction so incredibly important? Because the way coffee interacts with these two conditions is completely different. And once you grasp this, the conflicting advice you've been hearing will finally start to make sense. The advice to stop your coffee is almost always aimed at the first problem, the BPH story, the story of symptoms. So let's dive into that. Let's talk about why, for many of you, coffee can feel like your absolute worst enemy. I want you to be honest. That morning coffee, it's a comfort, isn't it? For my own father, a man named Robert, it was his sacred ritual. The smell of the beans grinding, the warmth of the mug in his hands as he read the morning paper. It was his signal that the day had truly begun. So when his doctor told him to cut it out to help with his BPH, it felt like a punishment. He thought, what does coffee have to do with it? It's not making my prostate grow, is it? And he was right about that. This is the central myth we need to bust right now. There is no strong scientific evidence to suggest that drinking coffee makes your prostate gland physically grow larger. That is not what's happening. The problem isn't the coffee's effect on the prostate gland itself, but its effect on your bladder. Here's the simple science. The caffeine in your coffee is a double-edged sword for a man with BPH. First, it's a diuretic. You've probably noticed this. You drink a cup of coffee, and not long after, you have to use the restroom. A diuretic is any substance that tells your kidneys to produce more urine, faster. So you're essentially increasing the amount of water you're trying to force through that already squeezed garden hose. It's like turning up the spigot when you know there's a kink in the line. But that's only half the story. The other, more powerful effect is that caffeine is a known bladder irritant. Think of your bladder muscle as being a bit on edge because of all the extra work it's doing to push against the prostate. It's already tense. Caffeine comes along and essentially pokes that already irritable muscle. It makes the bladder wall twitchy and hypersensitive. This is what creates that awful feeling of urgency. It's not just that you have to go, it's that you have to go right now. Your bladder is sending frantic, premature signals to your brain saying, I'm full, we have to go now, even when it isn't actually full. This is why a single cup of coffee can send you running to the bathroom 3 times in an hour. It's not just filling your bladder. It's making your bladder overreact. One study I looked at highlighted this perfectly, finding that men with a higher caffeine intake had a 1.5 times greater risk of having bothersome BPH symptoms. Not a greater risk of BPH itself, but of the symptoms that make life difficult. So when your doctor tells you to avoid caffeine, they're giving you sound advice for symptom management. They are trying to calm down your overworked, irritated bladder and give you some peace and quiet from the constant calls of nature. The action step here is simply to acknowledge this connection. The next time you feel that sudden, desperate urge to go, ask yourself, when was my last cup of coffee? The red flag is when these symptoms are severely disrupting your life, especially your sleep. Constant nighttime urination, or nocturia, is more than just an annoyance. It's a major health issue that can lead to fatigue, falls, and other problems. If you're getting up more than 2 or 3 times a night, that is a clear signal to have a serious conversation with your doctor about a comprehensive BPH management plan. This is the BPH story. It's real, it's valid, and for millions of men, reducing caffeine is a key step toward getting their lives back. The problem is, the story doesn't end there. All right, let's just take a quick breath here. This is a lot of information, I know. We've established the crucial difference between a benign enlarged prostate, BPH, which is a plumbing issue, and prostate cancer, which is a cellular issue. And we've seen exactly why that morning cup of coffee, through its diuretic and bladder irritating effects, can turn the volume way up on those frustrating BPH symptoms. If this is starting to clear up the confusion for you and you're finding this helpful, I would be so grateful if you took just 1 second to tap that like button below. It's a small click for you, but it makes a huge difference in helping this information get out to more men who might be stuck in that same cycle of frustration. Thank you for that. Now, just when you were about to put your coffee maker up for sale on Craigslist, we need to talk about the other side of this story, the second prostate, the cancer story. This is where the narrative takes a sharp and, for many, a very surprising turn. Because while your doctor is focused on calming your bladder symptoms today, researchers at some of the world's top institutions are looking at the long-term picture, and what they're finding about coffee is nothing short of remarkable. This is the information that causes so much whiplash. It's the great contradiction. Let's get right to the headline maker, which comes from the Harvard School of Public Health. In a massive study that followed nearly 50,000 men over a 20-year period, researchers found something stunning. Men who drank the most coffee, we're talking 6 or more cups per day in this study, had a nearly 20% lower risk of developing any form of prostate cancer. But here is the most important part. They found that these same men had a staggering 60% lower risk of developing lethal prostate cancer. That's the aggressive, deadly form of the disease that everyone fears. Let that sink in for a moment. A 60% reduction in risk. That is a massive number in the world of nutrition science. So what on earth is going on here? The answer, it seems, has very little to do with the caffeine that's causing all the trouble for your bladder. The magic is in the coffee bean itself. Coffee is one of the richest sources of antioxidants in the Western diet. It is packed, absolutely loaded, with powerful plant-based compounds like polyphenols and diterpenes. These are substances that fight inflammation throughout the body and protect your cells from the kind of damage that can lead to cancer. Think of them as a team of microscopic bodyguards for your cells. 2 of these compounds, in particular named caffeine and caffeol, have shown potent anti-cancer effects in lab studies. And this brings us to what I call the decaf loophole. A lot of men ask, if it's the bean and not the buzz, does decaf work too? The answer, according to the research, appears to be yes. That same Harvard study found that the benefits for reducing lethal prostate cancer risk were seen with both caffeinated and decaffeinated coffee. This is fantastic news. It tells us that the protective elements are intrinsic to the coffee bean and survive the decaffeination process. And for those of you who really want to get into the details, there's even what some call the unfiltered truth. This is fascinating. Those 2 compounds I mentioned, caffeine and caffeol, It turns out that standard paper coffee filters, like the ones in your drip machine, trap a significant amount of them. But methods that don't use a paper filter, like a French press, Turkish coffee, or boiled Scandinavian-style coffee, allow more of these beneficial compounds to pass through into your cup. Now, these unfiltered coffees can also raise LDL cholesterol in some people, so it's a trade-off to discuss with your doctor, but it shows just how deep the science on this goes. It's not just about if you drink coffee, but potentially how you brew it. So now you see the conflict. Your doctor says stop to manage your BPH symptoms. The Harvard researcher says drink up to reduce your long-term cancer risk. And here's the key takeaway. They are both right. They're just talking about two different things. They're addressing two different goals. And understanding that puts the power back in your hands. It's not about choosing which expert is right. It's about choosing which goal is your priority right now and finding a strategy that respects both. This brings us to the most important part of our conversation today. All the science and all the studies in the world don't matter as much as this one thing, your own personal experience. How does coffee actually affect your body? Some men can drink an espresso after dinner and sleep like a baby. Others, like my friend Jerry, find that even a weak cup of coffee at noon means he'll be up 4 times that night. The only way to know for sure which camp you're in is to become your own health detective. So I want to propose something to you. Not a permanent, drastic life change, but a simple 2-week experiment. Let's call it the 2-week no coffee challenge. The goal here is simple, to give your body a clean slate and observe what happens. Instead of taking my word for it, or your doctor's, or Harvard's, you are going to gather your own data. For just 14 days, I want you to completely eliminate caffeinated coffee. You can switch to decaf, or try an herbal tea like chamomile or peppermint. The key is to remove the caffeine. And during these 2 weeks, you're going to keep a very simple journal. You don't need a fancy notebook. The back of an envelope will do. Every morning, I want you to jot down 3 things. First, how many times did you get up last night to use the bathroom? Be honest. Was it 1, 3, 5 times? Write it down. Second, on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate your sense of urinary urgency during the day? Is it a 1, meaning totally calm and in control? Or is it a 5, meaning a constant, nagging, anxious feeling that you need to be near a restroom at all times? Third, just a general note. Did you feel like you had to go more or less often than usual? That's it. At the end of the 2 weeks, you will have your own personalized data set. You'll be able to look back and say, wow, when I was off coffee, I was only getting up once a night. But now that I've added it back, I'm back up to 3 times. Or you might find the opposite. You might find that it makes absolutely no difference to your symptoms at all. Your issue might be more related to an enlarged prostate that needs medical treatment, or perhaps from drinking too much water right before bed. Whatever the result, the knowledge is power. You are no longer guessing. You are moving from a place of confusion to a place of certainty about how this one specific thing, caffeine, affects your BPH symptoms. This simple act of self-investigation is the most empowering step you can take. Now let's say you do the challenge, and you discover without a doubt that caffeine is a major trigger for your urinary symptoms. But the thought of giving up coffee forever, that rich flavor, that comforting morning ritual, is just too much to bear. This is where the Robert in our audience persona feels stuck. But you don't have to be. This isn't an all-or-nothing game. It's time to move from no coffee to smart coffee. This is the Smart Coffee Drinker's Guide designed to help you keep the ritual you love while minimizing the problems you hate. First, and most obviously, is to seriously consider making the switch to decaf. Based on what we've learned today, this is the closest you can get to a perfect solution. You get the taste, the aroma, the warmth, and the psychological comfort of your morning ritual. You also get, according to the major studies we've discussed, those powerful cancer risk-reducing compounds found in the coffee bean itself. What you don't get is the caffeine that acts as a diuretic and a bladder irritant. For so many men, this single switch is a life changer. It allows them to have the best of both worlds: immediate symptom relief for their BPH and potential long-term protective benefits. Second, let's talk about timing. This is so simple yet so effective. I want you to implement what I call a fluid curfew. This means you set a hard stop for all fluids, especially diuretics like coffee or tea, for at least 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed. Think about it. If you have that pinched garden hose, the last thing you want to do is try and force a huge volume of water through it right before you lie down for 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. By stopping your fluid intake early in the evening, you give your body plenty of time to process those liquids and empty your bladder before you get into bed. This one habit can dramatically reduce nocturia, those nighttime trips to the bathroom, more than almost anything else. So, your coffee is a morning-only beverage, no exceptions. Third, for some men, it's not just the caffeine, but also the acidity of coffee that can be an irritant. If you've tried decaf and still feel some discomfort, you might want to watch the acidity. This is where a different brewing method can make a surprising difference. Cold brew coffee is a great option to explore. When coffee is brewed with cold water over a long period, it results in a coffee concentrate that is naturally 60 to 70% less acidic than its hot brewed counterpart. It's much smoother and gentler on the entire digestive system, including the bladder. You can make a batch that will last you the whole week. It's another tool in your toolbox, another experiment you can run to find what feels best for your body. So you have options. You can go full decaf. You can stick with regular coffee, but only in the morning. You can try a lower acid cold brew. You are not a victim of circumstance. You are a strategist, figuring out the best way to integrate this thing you enjoy into your life in a way that serves your health. So after all of this, we circle back to that big scary title: Seniors, Stop Your Morning Coffee. Is it true? As you've seen today, the answer is a resounding "it depends." The advice to stop your coffee is not wrong. It's just incomplete. It's a recommendation written in shorthand. The full story is that you may need to stop the caffeine to manage the symptoms of BPH, but the coffee itself, the bean, may be a powerful ally in the long-term fight against a more serious disease. The decision is not a simple yes or no. It's not about the coffee. It's about the caffeine and the context. It's about you, standing at the intersection of your short-term comfort and your long-term health, and realizing you don't have to choose one over the other. You have wins you can celebrate today. You now understand the fundamental difference between BPH and prostate cancer. You know exactly why caffeine can make you run to the bathroom, and you know it's not making your prostate grow. You've learned about the incredible research on coffee's potential to reduce the risk of lethal cancer. And most importantly, you have a plan. You have the 2-week challenge to become your own detective and the Smart Coffee Drinker's Guide to build a new, healthier relationship with your morning cup. You are in the driver's seat. You have the map. You understand the terrain. And you can now make the journey with confidence instead of confusion. Now, I would love to hear from you. This is where the conversation really begins. Based on everything we've talked about, which point was the biggest aha moment for you? Is it the difference between BPH and cancer, the idea of the decaf loophole, or are you planning to take the 2-week challenge? Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments section below. Your story could be the very thing that helps another man find his own path to clarity. And if you found this deep dive valuable, if you appreciate this approach of going beyond the headlines to give you the full picture, please be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring that little notification bell. We have so much more to talk about on the journey to healthy, empowered aging. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. It's a privilege to share this information with you. Be well, stay empowered, and I'll see you in the next video.